Okie dokie. So, in this video, we're going to go over classes in TypeScript. This might be the last basics of TypeScript before we get back into Angular. I only did this because I wanted to make a few TypeScript videos because that is what you're going to be using in Angular. If you've never seen TypeScript, if you're like me, when you first got introduced to Angular, you didn't know TypeScript. You only knew like the basics of JavaScript, which isn't very different, right? We learned that in video 1, but it's still a new concept, so I thought, why not make a few videos going over the basics? And this is probably the last one of this 3 video series inside of our main series of Relearning Angular. So if you like this kind of content too, and you want to stay tuned for what's coming out in the future, feel free to subscribe. I do appreciate it. We're getting, I said this in the last couple of videos, we're getting close to 2K subs, which is fantastic. It took me a long time to get to 1K, so 2K is a cool milestone to hit. And yeah, feel free to subscribe if you like it, and stay tuned for whatever else may come out on this channel after this series of Relearning Angular. And so I got VS Code back up right where we left off, and we talked about interfaces in the last video. Not the interface of class inheritance, using an interface as a type, meaning that we have this structure here, that's how I think of it, and it makes sure that whenever you create a variable as this type, that it has the proper properties of that interface. And if you didn't check that one out, I recommend you do so. Today we're just going to talk about classes. So classes are just like any other object-oriented programming language. If you know C#, you're probably not going to find any of this too surprising. There's one difference between this and C# that I'm going to point out that I'm at least aware of. I'm sure there's a lot that I'm not aware of. But just like before, when we made person in the interface, let's make person as now a class. So in our case, there's going to be a few properties of this, just like there were in the interface. And then the first one's going to be name. So it's going to be of type string. And the second one's going to be age, and it's going to be a number. We're not going to add any methods yet. I just want to show classes. And right off the bat, if you're used to C#, you might say, well, these, don't explicitly say that these properties are public. So how are we going to access these and set values to them when we instantiate a class? Well, by default, these properties are public. It's not like C# where they're by default private unless you say so. To make them private, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's not worry about private and public just yet. Let's just worry about here's a person class. It has 2 properties, it has name and age. Let's go ahead and instantiate that class, create a person object. We'll say var person1 is equal to a new person. And we can go ahead and set name and age to this person. Now we can say person1 dot name is equal to Susan, and her age, person1 dot age, we can set equal to 31. Now if we do console.log, we can print these values out. So let's put name, and let's also put the age in there. So just like before, we're going to use the TypeScript compiler and test.ts, not JS, and compile that guy. And now let's run node and test JS. And here we go, we get Susan and 31 printed out. So these are public because we instantiated this and we're able to access these properties. If I made this private, meaning you can't access name outside of the class, right? We might have some methods in here that do something with name or a constructor, but outside of that, like this, I'm not able to set name because it is private. And VS Code even picks that up. It says property name is private and only accessible within the class. And if I were to try to compile this, I don't expect the message to be any different. So let's see what happens. It says we got 2 errors. Both of them, I'm sure, are linked to us referencing .name. Yeah. So yeah, it's private. We're not able to access this outside of the class. So by default, everything's public. Just FYI. So let's add a constructor, and it's going to accept a string, and we can give this a value, or not a value, a name of I guess we'll just go with name. Name of type string. And here we're going to say this dot name is equal to name. And what that's doing, it's looking at inside a class, the name property. We're going to set that value equal to the name passed in the constructor. So now if I do new person and I do Todd as the name, let's get rid of this Susan line. We'll save this, recompile, and run the JavaScript. And here we get Todd 31. Notice we didn't have to do, person dot name is equal to Todd. The constructor did that for us when it constructed this object, this person1 object. And lastly, let's just show how to make a method. Not that it's probably any different than what you've seen. And I guess I should have mentioned this at the beginning. This tutorial wasn't like, classes for beginners, like classes and entirely like object-oriented programming. I was just showing how to create classes specifically in TypeScript. Maybe it's a little late for me to say that, but just so you know. Now here's something interesting. We're looking at the TypeScript tutorial, which is what I've been doing for these last couple of videos. They don't call these methods. They call them fields and functions in a TypeScript class. So I guess I've been naming those wrong. We should have named, instead of properties, fields, and then instead of methods, functions. So let's show what a function, in my mind, it's synonymous with method, but let's show what that looks like. So we want to name this function. I'm going to say get num, and it's going to return a type of number. And it's not going to take anything, so let's give it open and close parentheses right here, and then define, oops, what happened here? And define this function. And right now it's freaking out. We see number has red squiggly because as of right now, this function isn't returning anything yet because we haven't written it. So don't freak out that it's freaking out. So let's just return 10. Pretty simple. And let's do another console.log and do person1.getNum. And I expect it to say Todd 31 and then on a new line 10. And it didn't because I didn't compile. So let's compile it and then try to run JavaScript. I'm going to make this a little bigger. And there we go. We get Todd 31, 10. Disregard me calling these properties and methods. I guess that's not how TypeScript calls them. See, we're all learning something. That's the point of this. Not only are you learning, hopefully, from this, but I am learning, trying to go over it. All right, so that's the basics of classes. Of course, if you follow along in this Learning Angular tutorial, we're going to see them more often. So don't worry, this isn't the only time you're going to see classes, and we'll create more, I'm sure, in the future. But yeah, that's all I wanted to accomplish in this video, just show you what the class structure in TypeScript looks like. It's probably no different than what you're used to with other programming languages that you've seen. So I hope to see you in the next video. Hopefully we'll get back into Angular now.